Welcome to Real Vision, the Defiant's weekly musing on money, markets, and everything in between. And as you can see, the pressure of dreaming up yet another ridiculous introduction to this show has split me off from my corporeal form, leaving only this digital weirdness in its place. Would you just marvel at the mohawk? Just look at the springiness in that. It's beautiful. Joining me from the meat space is Real Vision senior editor and crypto editor Ash Bennington, who looks suitably bemused and rightfully questioning her decision to hire me if I'm going to do this kind of nonsense. It's Camilla Russo.
It's why I hired you, Robin.
It is why you hired. So let me first explain what's going on here. I'm streaming to you live from inside Unreal Engine. This is a set that we've built to take advantage of MetaHumans. My face is being captured by a phone and streaming literally in real time what I'm doing directly to this character. So Alb, if you go to camera 2, we should be able to show the setup. So this is basically it. We've got a Defiant dance floor. We've got a me bit hanging in space, a banana because everybody needs a banana, and then some simple props. And then if you go to camera 3 out, you can see this is the setup. There's the phone that's capturing my face. That's me. I'm real. And there's Alp, video editor, producer, director, who's just been bashing his head against the desk trying to make this all work. But work it has. Let's go back to camera 1. There you go. That supreme mohawked monster. The reason we're doing this is because if you want to talk about the metaverse and you want to actually express what the metaverse is and what it can do, then you kind of have to go there. And this is the technology that allows us to do it. And what you don't know is that before we even got as far as this, the whole thing crashed and we had to start again. That's how bleeding edge this is. So Ash, what do you make of it?
Well, I'm pleased we have a fire extinguisher in the background in case the meat space catches on fire. Look, it's really cool. It's neat stuff. Obviously, what you're looking at here is like version 0.015, which is what makes the technology so interesting. But it is really, to me, the striking thing about this is how well synchronized those facial expressions, the motion of your head is with your actual real, in real time with your actual head. Really fascinating, and the technology is only going to get better. So very cool stuff, man. Very cool.
Cami, we've been promising to do this for some time, and now here we are. And you've seen, you've seen the kind of stuttery, not quite there yet versions of this, and every week we have to iterate on it. The fun thing about this is that it's basically anything you want to do, you can do, but you have to program it. And it's sort of similar to what we do with DeFi and being able to do anything you want to do, but you have to know how to program it. And once you dig under the hood and you understand that everything is a variable, it can be plugged into another variable to allow you to express yourself in a myriad of different ways, it's both utterly terrifying, but also completely empowering. And I feel like there's like this whole idea of programmability is going to feed into pretty much everything now. So rather than buying a template off the shelf, there's ultimate customization, ultimate, freedom to do what you want to do with what you want to do. But you just have to have quite a lot of brain space to be able to compute all of that and make it work. So like you said, I think it's a long way off, but like this is what the metaverse is going to be like. This is basically it happening right now in front of you. It's wild. So Cami, let's start with you. What stories have been on your radar this week, and what have you brought to the table?
There's been a lot of regulatory concerns hanging over crypto. It feels like this has been the story that's been looming in the background and that we kind of ignored in the bull market. And now that prices are crashing, it's kind of coming to the forefront that there might be some regulatory crackdown. As we saw actually in the past bear market, the past bear market came with like this crackdown on ICOs, and it seems like it's happening all over again this time. There's a bear market, and there's like a bunch of regulatory concerns hanging over crypto again.
Yes, boom. And as you can see, I've got explosions ready to go just to add a kind of light-hearted counterpoint to all this. Ash, what's your take on the regulatory headwinds or otherwise going on in the market at the moment?
Well, the talk right now, of course, is about these rumors about the Biden administration releasing a national security memo to begin to provide some regulatory clarity around the crypto space. I think for me, the interesting thing about this is where it's not coming from. Which is Congress, which in the United States is the body that's supposed to legislate these and all other types of regulatory action. And it's not happening right now because Congress is obviously in a state of significant dysfunction. And so for me, the fact that you have the executive branch that has the capacity to act unilaterally very quickly, suggests that we are seeing these challenges in the legislative process, in the political process, where we should be getting legislative clarity.
Well, it's interesting because you brought the India story to the table this morning, and
Yeah.
it's funny enough, India's been fairly adamant that they wanted to ban cryptocurrencies. Then I think Modi said he was worried it would spoil the youth of the country. And as late as November last year, there was very strong move from India to introduce a framework for banning cryptocurrencies. Yesterday, a different story came out. Could you give us more detail on what actually happened there?
Yeah, it seems like we're getting some legislative clarity. Unfortunately, it's coming not in the United States, but in India. And it is this progress that we're seeing toward a normalization of the crypto space. Right now, the main hit that you hear about this, what's happening in India, is that there's a 30% tax rate being imposed on crypto. My feeling, and interestingly enough, I had a conversation with someone off the record yesterday. I had a lot of background in the traditional finance and hedge fund space. We both had the same reaction to this, which is don't worry about the number. Don't worry about the 30% number. That's something that's going to probably decline. What's important here is that this is the proverbial foot in the door to begin the conversation about the path to normalization and legalization of cryptocurrency in India. Look, I think the Indian government here has taken a very savvy look at this and realized that in many ways, this is something that can benefit the country, can help to unify the country if they can find the proper legislative framework to do it. Now, I guess that is a big if, but the reality is these are incredibly powerful technologies, and with the right type of public policy, these are things that could be extremely, extremely beneficial, particularly in emerging markets where there are so many millions of people who are currently unbanked.
Well, there's quite a lot of nuance to what they were saying because, yes, the 30% tax rate is one thing. Another piece of that is that you can't tax loss harvest it. So any losses you incur cannot be offset against tax. So it's a fairly heavy penalty. But if you've been Indian, the government has been adamantly against this. What was interesting as well was the language that Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, I'm sorry, I just mangled your name. The finance minister used in talking about cryptocurrencies because they've announced their CBDC, the digital rupee. She was very, very clear to say, this is a digital asset. It will be built on blockchain. It will actually be a currency because it is being issued by the Reserve Bank of India, a central bank. Anything else that isn't issued by a reserve bank or a central bank cannot be a currency. Therefore, it will be taxed like this. She was very, very clear on that in all the statements in the press conference afterwards. And it was like, you could almost see her anticipating a volley of questions about specifically this. Like, have you just given way to the crypto anarchists? So I think it's very, very interesting to see where they're going. I think the implications of the digital rupee are immense for one simple reason: 1.4 billion people. Cami, have you got a feeling on this one?
Well, I think the main takeaway is that India has shifted its stance for crypto pretty radically in the space of just a couple of months, which is huge news for one of the biggest emerging countries. It went from not wanting to have anything to do with crypto to introducing regulation for crypto, which basically just makes it legal and makes it acceptable for this industry to flourish in India and for digital assets to be used. Even if it's like at a 30% tax, it just means, okay, they can be used in a legal way, which is huge. And I think Ash is right to say that 30% number, it'll come down, it'll be renegotiated. But the main point is that, digital assets are now legal and okay to use in India. And it looks like from what the finance minister is saying, it's like they want to have the digital rupee outcompete other digital currencies by introducing this 30% tax, and having that differentiation of the digital rupee won't have this because it is the only actual currency, actual digital currency. So that's going to be interesting and seeing how it plays out, whether people would rather use this CBDC or other kind of stable coins or other digital assets, even if they do have to pay that 30% tax. I think that will be a question for kind of the free market to decide. It will definitely be interesting to see how it plays out. And well, the other item to point out is how quickly this like CBDCs sector is evolving. With China is working on its digital currency. India is now expecting to roll one out. So we see kind of these major economies looking at this very seriously and planning to roll out these digital assets, which I don't know, like I've said it before, I feel very uneasy about governments having so much control over your money, and just like this ability of increased surveillance makes me a bit uneasy for sure. But I don't know, I think all the details on how these currencies are actually rolled out haven't really been clarified yet. So I guess it's like just TBD on how all these CBDCs are actually used.
Hey, Robin, can I throw in one other point there?
Yeah.
Excellent analysis, as always, by Cami. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Let me just point out an important distinction. There's a lot of debate always around this topic, and it's almost like a philosophical or religious debate. Is Bitcoin money? All these questions are interesting ones, but I would point out the important factor that makes an official currency, a reserve currency, a legal tender, is the fact that you can remit your taxes in it, right? So at the end of the day, no matter how passionate we are about Bitcoin, when you file your taxes at the end of the year, you have to pay those taxes in US dollars. The idea of a digital rupee, where you can theoretically pay your taxes in that digital currency, totally different from anything else you might own for that reason. An important distinction.
Absolutely. And I guess the question is now, what does the US do? You've got a large chunk of the world's population instantly exposed to digital currencies. What does the US do? It seems that it doesn't know whether to stick or twist on this issue, and it's going to have to decide soon.
What will they do, or what should they do?
I mean, it depends what they want to accomplish. Do they want to, maintain parity or hegemony in the world with the US dollar? Well, of course they do. So they have to do something. But they are seemingly, as you rightly said, kind of constipated in Congress and sort of unable to get out of each other's hair for stuff that is sort of less important. But I mean, the world is going to do what it's going to do, and India has made its move now. So I'm very curious about this. Let's move on to another story now. And Cami, you wanted to bring up one of the kind of the big scandals that blew up last week around Danny Sestigali, Wonderland, and a whole bunch of stuff that nobody saw coming, but which has just left shockwaves through DeFi. Can you explain what happened there?
Yeah. So what happened last week is that okay, so just like quick context, there's this project called Wonderland that stemmed off of this new DeFi 2.0 wave that we've covered before last year. And Wonderland is one of these projects from this new like DeFi 2.0, which is already, I think, dying, by the way, which is like very short-lived movement of protocols trying to own their own liquidity and have more loyal users and so on. So anyways, that's kind of where Wonderland comes from. And Wonderland is founded by Daniel Sestegali, also known as Daniel Sesta, and he's the project's treasurer, or another kind of co-founder in the project is this person known as Sifu. Well, last week, somebody on Twitter posted screenshots of a conversation with Danny. And in that conversation, it was clear that Danny knew that Sifu was one of the co-founders of Quadriga, the Canadian exchange that ended up running away. I mean, the founder of the exchange died, and it closed, and the users of the exchange, clients of this exchange, ended up using millions, over $100 million in funds. So anyways, the co-founder of Quadriga, this Canadian exchange, is Sifu, the guy holding the treasury of Wonderland, this new DeFi 2.0 project. And that's bad, but what's worse is that Danny, who really rose into like DeFi Hall of Fame last year, like he just like became this like rock star, followed by like a frog nation is what like his fans call themselves. And he knew that he was dealing with this person with not so good reputation, who had lost millions of dollars in user funds and was now controlling funds of this new DeFi protocol. And not just Quadriga, but there were also like a series of different issues or problems that were surfaced allegedly. Of course, like none of this has been 100% proven, but he has been his real identity was uncovered, and he's actually Michael Patron, the Quadriga co-founder. So anyways, all of that kind of blew up. The consequences are still kind of being felt, like the pieces are still landing. Wonderland users are still kind of deciding and voting on what to do with the project, whether it should dissolve or not. They voted to not dissolve the project. So it's been a huge mess. And I think, it's like DeFi is coming to this place where it's facing the dangers and the downsides of having all of these anonymous founders, where it's the plus side is the lack of censorship and true decentralization and all of that, but the downside is that you don't really get the track record and the reputation that comes from having real people behind the project. So
yeah, it's a mess. And I think one of the interesting things about this story is that Danny and the Frog Nation rose up because there was a bunch of people who felt marginalized or looked down upon by the kind of DeFi OGs. So you had MakerDAO and DAI, and one of Danny's projects, Abracadabra, sprung up as a contender to that. And it was a series of these things where this rabble of counterculture people and counterculture meme artists basically rose to power and managed to attract a lot of value and believed the folk hero and the folk story about what they were doing, and then it's blown up. And so everyone who was like, oh gosh, these idiots, and now they've been proven correct. So everyone who said this was all a scam and a Ponzi is like, well, we were correct. It's a lot more complicated than that. And there's also this idea that we talk about DeFi being permissionless. Like it doesn't care who you are and where you've been and what you've done. And here's a perfect example of someone whose history puts that to the test. This is someone who was associated with something where people lost a lot of money, and there's a very strong ethical question here. But should that even factor in? It's a really tough one to call, and there's a lot of head scratching going on about how best to deal with it. Ash, does that sort of make sense to you, how it's all played out? Because there are some, amongst all the politicking, there are some serious questions to be asked about what DeFi is and the ethics of it.
Well, let me take it more generally. So big picture here, what you're talking about, I think two sides of the same coin: incredible innovation, incredibly dynamic space, but also an incredible amount of risk. Obviously, these are newer protocols. These are things that do not have long-term track records. We are experimenting, testing in real time here. So I think people need to understand that this is an incredibly exciting space. If you want to look at what the future may look like, there are all of these different options, all of these different models out there. But this is a highly speculative space to get involved with. And people need to understand this is very much Adult Swim when they dive in with their real money.
Well, that gives us a neat segue, because I want to read out some comments about a journalist. And someone put out a video 10 days ago. It's seen like 4 million views or so. It's about NFTs. It's called Line Goes Up. And it talks about a specific journalist and the book that she wrote. And it calls it a journalistic abortion, calls her a failed journalist. And it calls into question the balance the ethics, the journalistic quality of the work she put out. The journalist in question is, in fact, Camilla Russo. The book she wrote, Infinite Machine. And it goes on. I made a film answering this film, and I have had a volley of abuse about the fact that I even deigned to do so, in which we get the following. Camilla deserves to be shamed for the garbage she's put out. She's not unbiased, and it's clearly led a bunch of people towards a financial cliff, Pied Piper style. This entire cryptosphere is an experiment with no real concrete value and extreme environmental cost. So we are at a point now where someone made a 2.5-hour film that went into excruciating detail about all the scams, all the risks, everything that is wrong with crypto. And he did it in such a way that it was very, very difficult for any of us to respond in a meaningful, balanced, and well-reasoned way, because to respond properly, we would need 6 weeks. None of us has 6 weeks to do so. And so, Camilla, I wanted to give you a chance to respond to what was said here, because it felt like an unwarranted attack on you. But now you've had a chance to think about it. But how do you respond to this?
Well, I think first thing I would say is that I didn't feel the need to respond to him. I think, he made his analysis on NFTs. He has his right to his opinion about the space. I think he made some valid points. I think the points he made can be argued against. But there are tons of people who don't like NFTs because they use blockchains, and they don't like blockchains because of the environmental impact that they have. Which to me, there's like a whole argument to be made for the environmental impact of blockchains. Is like, do you think that this whole industry is valuable enough to require that energy behind it? I think yes. Other people will think no, and he thinks it doesn't require all that energy. And they think NFTs are bringing money to the internet, and money is like this dirty word apparently. That shouldn't be mixed with art, and it's this whole kind of different worldview from my own, which I can respect, and he should be fine to have it and express it. Now, like, his attacks on my book and on my person come from that place, from just having an extremely negative opinion about crypto. I think my book was balanced. At least it was factual. It was accurate. I did not report anything that was inaccurate about Ethereum. The book has been out for 2 years now. There has been plenty of times for everyone involved in the book to tell me if I was wrong about anything. None of that happened. So I did put out a factual account about the history of Ethereum, and that is a fact. Now, I do have my own opinion, and he's entitled to his opinion. I'm entitled to my opinion. Of course, I run a media company that is focused on communicating all the developments in DeFi and Web3. Of course, I have a favorable opinion about crypto. I'm in it full time. I think it will continue to grow. I think it is the future of finance. I think it will underpin the internet and the financial system. So yes, I've been very clear that I do have a bias for crypto. I like it. I think it's a future. I think it's a very positive and revolutionary development about the world. And he can disagree with me, and I think that's fine. So I think that's where all his kind of hate comes from, and I accept it. Of course, like, that does not mean that I'm not a good journalist. That does not mean that my book is an abortion. It just means that we have a different view on crypto. And I think he took that a bit too far. But, that's on him, not on me.
Ash, were you aware of this piece? It was circulated pretty widely.
Yeah, let me pivot a little bit to an important point that I think that you made in your rebuttal film. So you mentioned this idea that this is a technology. And that, criticizing NFTs as a technology, it's like criticizing a PDF file because someone prints material and digitally circulates it in a form that you don't like, right? So we're still incredibly early in this phase. I think it's important for people to get the big picture view of what NFTs are. NFTs are effectively tokens that have a unique digital fingerprint, so that unlike Bitcoin or Ethereum, you basically have the ability to have a singular identity for a particular token. That has just an enormous amount of potential positive benefits for all different types of functionality. From the securitization of assets on the one hand to digital art, we're still in the, again, we're talking about this, it reminds me of the metaphor for the metaverse here. We're still in 0.015 on this. I think there are going to be some incredibly interesting applications that are going to come of this. If you just think this through, where we could be in 1, 3, 5 years on NFTs and some of the use cases, you sort of alluded to this as well in your rebuttal, which is that we're flawed, imperfect creatures, and we're going to see these challenges where human beings are not going to reach some sort of utopia of evolution as a consequence of the technology. And it very much remains to be seen how we're going to sort this out, how we're going to come up with what's often called in DeFi and elsewhere in crypto, this idea of governance issues. How do you manage these protocols? How do you manage the technology? And how do you manage the human beings who are involved with them? To pick up on Cammy's point, I think this technology is incredibly exciting because it is a tool. It facilitates these use cases. How we get there, it's going to be messy. At times, it's going to be ugly. But I really do believe, as Cammy said, in the future of this technology and for what it is going to do for virtually every aspect of our experience, from communication to business to finance, really interesting technologies here. It's going to be a long slog to get there, though.
Well, I spent a long time thinking about how to respond to this film because I felt I needed to, and I'm someone who has made some long essay style films about this space, and so felt like it would be appropriate for me to do so. But it just it felt like going there and getting into a pit fight with Dan Olson, and we should call him out. This is Dan Olson, a Canadian YouTuber who actually weirdly he talks about things that I also talk about, which is narrative and film theory, and he's a filmmaker. And so I feel like we would connect on so many different levels, on so many different subjects. It's just this isn't one of them. And I thoroughly respect the work that went into it. But I also found myself constantly saying, yes, but. And that isn't helpful. You need to say yes, but, and then provide the example of. And for every single comment that he made, there were a bunch of people that said, well, yeah, that's exactly how I feel. That's exactly how I feel. And what I found coming back at me was so much aggression and hostility when the film I put out was not aggressive or hostile in response at all. And I was making the point to Dan that you can make the environmental debate. You can say something is environmentally unsound about almost anything in life. And that's not excusing Ethereum or Bitcoin or any of these gas guzzling chains. It's just that, if you're going to sit down and watch Netflix for 3 hours every night, that has an environmental burden. If you're going to put out a film that doesn't need to be a film, that could just as easily be a podcast, then if you're going to place an ethical responsibility on each and every single one of us, then take a look at yourself and ask, is that really the right way to put this piece of content out? Now, that just seems petty to me because actually Dan's film has effectively reached an audience and started a debate and started a set of questions, which I think is right and fair. But I don't know how to start that conversation with Dan in any way other than it become looking like we're attacking him, because we're not. Why I actually 100% accept the criticisms as valid, but it's just that for every criticism you make, there are a bunch of very good, very solid things that are happening, but then you just look like you're kind of an apologist, which is no good at all. And so, like,
I don't think there's a need to have a specific rebuttal or answer to his film. Like I said, he has his opinion. He made a film about it. It's his right, and obviously, and it's done really well. And that's that. And then what we do is we continue reporting on the space in the way that we know how, with our own opinion and with our own analysis, and we put that out into the world. And I trust that people are intelligent. And they have the capacity of digesting different pieces of information. So for those who are interested in learning more about NFTs, and maybe Dan Olson's film piqued their interest, they'll be able to go and find our channel, hopefully, or some other channel and just learn more about NFTs. And that's kind of what we can do from our side, not responding to Dan specifically, but just continuing to provide knowledgeable, good quality, timely content about NFTs, and and content that is here and just follows the space as it unfolds. We're not just like doing a one-off film about NFTs because okay, we hate it and we're putting out our criticism. We're here in this space covering it every single day. And so for those who became curious about NFTs, we're here for them if they want to learn more and have like the other side of the issue.
Actually, I just wanted to ask, actually, do you get accusations of journalistic malpractice leveled at Real Vision ever? Does that ever come your way? Because I mean, we're in a risky space here, and that we will draw criticism.
I only get criticism when I'm awake. No, I mean it's constant, it's ubiquitous. This is part of the world that we live in today, right? And it's not just limited to cryptocurrency. We could see this with the sort of Joe Rogan, Neil Young, Spotify debate. We live in a period where there's been this dramatic democratization of the ability to communicate. The fact that you can very cheaply sit down in front of your computer and make a film and talk for 2 or 3 hours and distribute it at virtually zero cost. This is just a massive paradigm shift from where we were a decade ago. And I just don't think the culture has yet evolved and figured out how to have these conversations. And what happens is very often you spread a tremendous amount of heat rather than light. And that is just the nature of where we are right now. I mean, these technologies are incredibly powerful that you can create a video on your phone, distribute it on YouTube at virtually zero cost in virtually zero time, and then tweet about it to an audience of tens or hundreds of millions of people if you happen to get caught up in the updraft of a particular viral tweet. It's an extraordinary opportunity that democratizes the ability of people who have historically not had a voice to speak, which is a great thing. But also, it creates the ability to have a kind of conflict. I was talking about this on the air the other night, where I was saying, if my dad in the 1980s had a few cocktails on a Saturday night and said some things that were regrettable, on Sunday morning, he probably had 3 or 4 people he had to call and apologize to. Now it's the entire world, a global audience, and it can happen instantaneously. So those are the risks and also the opportunities of this. I just think that the culture hasn't yet figured out how to have these conversations in ways that are respectful and in ways that create the sort of ability for people to learn and understand these ideas without things being sort of personally intense, personally conflicting. It's very much a work in progress, and I think it's something that we're seeing in our politics. We're seeing it obviously in the digital asset space, but we're also just seeing it more broadly.
Well, there's a degree to which, there are many corrupt politicians around the world, but that doesn't mean that all politicians are corrupt. There are many bad actors in this space, and Dan was very keen to single them out and call out the scams. But there are people who are actually doing some good work and suffer from the same kind of ethical dilemmas that we all do. We did an incredible interview with Andre Cronje, and like that's literally Andre's is beset by this dilemma every day. Should I just stop building because everyone's an idiot and they're all just in it for a buck, or should I just keep persevering and keep getting back into it? Well, I think he's a masochist, so yes, he will. But I also feel like you can run away from this and call scam and get angry at it, or you can try and actually help steer the conversation and be part of, maybe it's a minority, maybe it's a tiny minority, but there are some people trying to do some good stuff. I will gravitate towards them. I'll filter the rest of the stuff out. And the best that I think we can do here at the Defiant is at least just try and educate, steer in the right direction. And if that's the only thing that we manage to get out of this, then I think we're still doing pretty well.
I think that's exactly right, Robin. And the reality is that the future belongs to the people who are willing to step up, take the risk, take the criticism, take the heat, and continue to respond and continue to function when the only thing you want to do is, throw your phone in the East River.
Do that. It's expensive, yo. It can't be. To wrap it up, is there anything on your radar coming up for next week? I mean, it feels like there's a brand new story every single week and something crazy about to break. But what's on your radar?
Gosh, on my radar, I think, like talking about NFTs, I'm really curious to see whether the market for NFTs continues to hold the way it has. I think that's been very surprising in this downturn, seeing how well NFT projects are doing. Like some of the kind of blue chip projects, the floors are going up. There's still demand for these digital, these JPEGs. So I think that I'll continue to track that market because it's been surprising to see how everything held up in the crash.
What about you, Ash? Anything on your radar?
I'm going to give the most painfully obvious answer, which is I'm going to be following price action on Bitcoin and Ethereum. Obviously, this is an interesting time that we find ourselves in. We're down from just shy of 69,000 in November on Bitcoin. That's down about 45%. And now from that trough, we're up around 27% from the low of 29,800 or thereabout on Bitcoin. Obviously, a volatile time. And it's something that is obviously going to have a great deal of impact on the way the space gets covered and the way things get talked about, thought about, even if we all who have been following this space for some time understand the volatility of these assets. But obviously, that is going to be a tremendous driver of the way the news cycle flows because of how sensitive human beings are to price. It is just the nature of the beast. So that's what I'm going to be watching, at risk of stating the obvious.
I like to think that you have the Bitcoin and Ethereum tickers like just on the inside of your glasses at all times. The way you just pulled those figures out of your butt like that, it was like, oh, wow. Has he just got it like dialed in there? I'm going to be casting my eyes eastward as the Beijing Olympics kick off because China's CBDC is launching at the Olympics. I'm very curious to see what's going to happen there. Of course, the entire games are shrouded in some kind of like human rights records and things. So it's going to be interesting to see how that whole thing plays out, the pageantry, the theater that will be presented to the world via this grand spectacle. So without further ado, it's probably time for us to pour some cold water on this extremely heated debate between two normal people and one weirdo with a mohawk. Thanks for joining us. We will see you at the same time next week, probably somewhere around that. Who knows who's going to be joining us, but it's sure to be a fun one. This has been Real Vision versus the Defiant. Thank you, Ash. Thank you, Cami. We'll see you next week.